Recently, Gaijin Goombah made a video discussing fanservice. This isn't a hate-filled rebuttal or a complete disagreement with what any of Gaijin Goombah has said, but an expansion of the question he proposed: what is fanservice? He brought up many good points about how it's a way of trying to please your audience and how many games that don't have excessive nudity may still be fanservice heavy. While I think he made some excellent points, I'm not sure if his expansion of the idea necessarily works, as it doesn't take into account how presentation differences work with the rest of the game, and when the perceived fan service is a symptom of game's key features instead of being its reason for being. So let me first say another word for fan service: pandering. Pandering is exactly what all fan service is. You target an audience and try to please them. Of course, the target should be fans, but the idea may ultimately be to draw an existing fan base and cater towards them. Since the booty and breast-loving demographics tend to be easy to please, they're the simplest to pander towards. Of course, the developers have to believe that this is what fans want to begin with, but with internet communities, everything eventually turns to porn. The internet may very well have defined fan service for the past decade, as it seems the most visible fans in all communities are the pervs, and the predictable reactions that can be on your mind when fan service happens may be based around this image. Besides the eventual fan-demanded orgy, fans may want to get more out of their games to fulfill some other desires, so what can matter most is what the games deliver for its players. Challenge, story, spectacle, competition, catharsis are all part of what make video games, and enforcing these aspects with pandering elements is a pretty easy way to benefit your fans' wishes. After all, fantasy and escapism is a big part of games, and players may want more of what draws them in. GG like to put the indulgence of more niche fantasy games into the fanservice category, and I disagree and agree with that. Car games are fanservice? I disagree that this is inherently fanservice-y, as I would argue the faster cars work to the intensity, challenge, and rewarding nature of improvement in racing games. However, the car reveals... that is fanservice to car lovers. Likewise, I'd argue that Mortal Kombat's violence and blood enforces the catharsis of the mechanics to make little action satisfying, enforces the spectacle that can make this enjoyable just to watch, and enforces the competitive sense of superiority that fighting games work well for. But... some of it does feel like it's fanservice, even if it's the signature of the series. Besides the more visual kind, story can be a source of fan service, and I'm quite surprised GG didn't point this out himself. If a game is particularly story-driven, a developer may recognize that a character is unpopular, so it'd be understood if they were altered, but... how far do you go until it seems like all you're doing is trying to make the fans like him? It's a bit of a case-by-case basis, but I think fan service creeps in as indulgence becomes less necessary to game mechanics or story, and when it begins to take away from the central experience. These types of fan service are a bit complex to analyze because they both work and don't work towards the core of the game, but seem more forgivable if they still fit. These moments can kill momentum or pacing, but they can be a spectacle to watch. They can be rewarding when they coincide with a feeling of progression, towards victory, towards completion, towards story, but they can also feel like empty space where you do nothing. There is, however, a common saving grace that stops them from feeling like fan service: context. All these moments fit the context they're in. Yeah, if you win races and win cars, it makes sense to give the time to enforce the importance of your newest ride. If you're in a grisly fight, a sense of savagely beating your opponent or rubbing your victory in their face fits. If technology has advanced to where machines have overtaken humans as the primary means of combat, a soldier of war becoming a more effective killer through technology is a story that works within this world. These redeeming values may be why only nudity is considered fan service and why others are not. Besides nudity, other kinds of fan service can be incredibly innocuous or consistent with other non-fan service elements. You could debate that a shift in character coinciding with fan opinion may help the world building or story, or that emphasizing the violence can make the competition feel more satisfying and visceral. But it's a bit tougher to argue to the benefits of close-ups that feel needless. That being said, enforcing a character's personality or the spectacle of the game is probably where it would stop being fan service. For example, I actually wouldn't classify either Dante or Bayonetta as fanservice characters, as their games are spectacle fighters where characters have to stand out visually, show as much personality as possible, put on a display pleasing to the eyes, and animate in a way where it's enjoyable just to control them. Similarly, I'd argue that fighting games need as many types of eye-catching character designs as possible, as a big part of fighting games is the characters animating well and striking out enough to where players' minor movements feel rewarding. When there's competitive engagement, it's really important to do everything you can to make a character pop out to the player to make them feel in control. It may sound bizarre to justify outfits that may not fit the fighting style, but being eye-catching in games that have a larger-than-life battle style can stop the players from getting bored of the character they want to learn. Nudity or sexual themes or even violence in excess can enforce the experience of play if used properly, and its absence may ultimately leave some games worse off. Tackling the poor reputation of nudity-heavy fanservice, skimpy designs and sexual themes in spectacle-heavy games should still have an engaging character that is both visually distinct and defined in who they are. When a sensual character still doesn't stand out or engage in any meaningful way, the character can feel like a hollow doll that the developers made sexy to distract the player from how dull the experience of playing is. Sexual themes are a particularly grounding element to characters, but when that process feels incomplete, an uncanny valley effect can almost be felt. I actually think this is part of the reason why people are particularly harsh on DOA. The characters are mostly uninteresting. DOA can be a very fun and rewarding game to learn, especially with how difficult 3D fighting games can be to understand, but people never even give it a chance because it feels like a game hiding its flaws behind fanservice, even if the flaws aren't as pronounced as they seem. The well-known buxom designs may stand out among the world of fighting games, but not when you compare the characters to each other. There's maybe 4 body types among the women and like 5 among the guys. Wardrobe does a better job for distinguishing characters, but with little in the way of visible personality besides a few standouts and some questionable animations, there just isn't enough for a player to feel unique when they pick a character. Spectacle and the sense of control is really hurt when your character doesn't feel unique enough, so relying on the same kinds of fanservice elements again and again will just hurt your game. A more recent example of fanservice being used to make up for uninteresting characteristics is actually Lara in Street Fighter V. Her animations, lines, and models are all super sexually charged, but it feels like a veil trying to hide how vacant and lifeless her character feels, since her personality feels like a fanfiction character. A driven but flirty confrontational character with sexual facials, animations, and costumes has been done well before. Although Lara's biggest weakness is her bad actress in both English and Japanese.
Oh, that sounds really exciting! Thank you! Well, I'm gonna head there right now!
Where Jury got amazing performances in both languages.
Officer? Or maybe you've got a little schoolgirl crush.
One way or another, you're coming with me!
This is gonna be fun.
Lara is still a good example of what I believe is the reason people associate nudity or sexuality in games with negativity, because it's so easy to abuse it to try to make a fan favorite out of an empty character. Nudity feeling needless can be weird, but it's weirder when it feels like it was necessary to hide obvious flaws. Sexuality can be such a lazy way out to avoid having to make a character personable or enjoyable, so don't be surprised when people start to expect things to suck when they see some familiar symptoms. I would like to quickly point out that my opinion on Laura is primarily based on her in story mode and watching tournament play, as I don't actually have the game yet and I've played Zangief and Chun only, so I don't have a complete statement of Laura until I get a full impression of how she used to play. There are some games I wouldn't even consider fan service, as I believe a lot of features intrinsic to a genre shouldn't be considered fan service. GG's Grand Theft Auto argument feels a bit hollow since the entire sandbox genre is built on the idea of giving the player as much freedom as possible. So unless an entire genre can be fan service, put porn in there too, I wouldn't classify wreaking havoc as fan service, but instead an option that allows the players to be challenged while giving them spectacle. Unnecessarily highbrow explanation aside, it feels bizarre to label this as fan service when it's player intention, not developer intention, that matters most. You can get in cars, get 6 stars, and steal a tank, but it's all up to you. The missions may show you what's capable in the world, but you can still choose to just explore for hidden items, or accept the various challenges in the game. If you had to account for player intention, all games with adjustable cameras would be fan service because you could theoretically focus on people's butts. The point is that what the player wants or expects out of the experience is important. So if a player is expected to have as much freedom as possible to do with how they please, it's not as if they're being targeted for a fandom or interest beyond what they originally came to the game for. So what is fan service? Whatever it is exactly, it's regarded as a somewhat desperate attempt at pleasing its perceived audience in a pandering manner that has no other redeeming values. This is probably why it's easiest to just point to nudity as a form of fan service, because it's going to stand out and it's probably going to please somebody. But as GG pointed out, it can go beyond that. Fans may want to see a cameo by a character they like, they may want to see the spectacle of as much violence as possible, they may love the fantasy of driving cars they could never possibly own, they may want a character to completely change, or they may just want a sense of validation for who they are outside the game. If there was any point I could make outside of this question, though still related, it's that what you consider fan service to some may be an enhancing feature to others. Mortal Kombat may bother you with how violent it is, but it's still part of a game that fits its style with defined characters who can be attachable enough to make the game engaging to some. Expect some debate to eventually be on Great Game Gals, the only show with more G-alliterations than Gaijin Goombah. Likewise, the skimpy outfits in some Street Fighter games may roll some eyes, but it's part of the more elegant presentation that enforces some of the rewarding competitive mechanics of the game. They can both be fan service, but that doesn't mean that that's all the games are, just because that's all that stands out to you. You don't have to shit on games just because they seem like they're only fan service, because there could be a whole lot you're missing, or a simple difference in taste. To each their own, and I hope you can at least appreciate the minor details in games more later. Hello there, I'm Carlito N.S.P. I've previously responded to Egoraptor's Ocarina of Time and Link to the Past review, and it was even referenced by Gaijin Goombah, although I don't think he actually watched it. I also try to speak positively on female characters, because somebody has to be the optimist on that topic. There's also another square that links to a video. I'm sure it's somewhere.